You're listening to the Yoga Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Land. This podcast brings you information and resources to enhance the therapeutic effects of your practice based on a deeper understanding of anatomy, physiology, and the integration of modern science and research with traditional practices and experiences. Join me and my co-hosts Tiffany Cruikshank and Katya Bach as we dive into all things yoga, research, and wellness. Hello and welcome back to the Yoga Medicine Podcast. It seems like opinions are becoming more and more polarized these days, dividing us between left and right, good or bad, right or wrong. But to my mind, one of the key things that we do as yoga students and teachers is to use our own self-awareness and discernment to navigate a path between extremes. With that thought in mind, today we're making time for a more philosophical conversation, examining one of those all or nothing themes that tends to recur in the yoga and wellness world. And that is whether comfort or its opposite, challenge, are more beneficial for ourselves and our students. Here to guide us on our conversational journey is returning guest Aisha Fakhro. You'll remember that Aisha is a Bahrain-based, UK-licensed psychotherapist and yoga teacher who specializes in grief, trauma, relationships, stress management, and personal growth. She draws on extensive training and experience in cognitive behavioral therapy, hypnotherapy, somatics, and the neuroscience behind mindfulness and embodiment practices. So, let's see if we can navigate a compassionate line between the extremes of comfort and challenge with our guide, Aisha Fakhro. Hello, Aisha. Welcome back to the Yoga Medicine Podcast.
Hey, Rachel. Always a joy to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you for this one. It was a topic that came up for me because I see these competing themes sort of swirling around in the yoga and wellness world. And when I thought about trying to thread a compassionate line between the two of them, you were the first person that I thought of in terms of who I'd want to have that conversation with.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a conversation I'm really excited to explore.
Yeah. So the idea is I see these influences in the yoga world really strongly from trauma-informed practices of trying to create welcoming and inclusive spaces and give our students autonomy. And at the same time, I see an equal amount of narrative focusing on how comfortable life has become and how we've got to be courageous and push ourselves outside of our comfort zones. And that's, where the benefit happens. And I'm sure there's some way to thread a line between the two. But as with most things in the social media world, it seems like those two just exist in polar opposition to each other, and there's no place for them to meet. So help me find a way for those two ideas to meet somewhere in a yoga practice or a yoga class.
Yeah, that's the thing with social media, right? Is we end up having to simplify really complex concepts into like absolutes, and that doesn't really fit the nuances of being human and the experience that comes with that.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that comes up for me when you say that is it's so interesting that we as teachers, and I would imagine we all do this. I know I definitely do this. We take on this pressure to need to know what students need and feel like we need to be the ones to deliver that. Like it's a burden that we have to carry to decide, should we be challenging students right now? Should we be offering comfort? And I can't remember which one of my teachers said this once, but they were like, just let the practice carry itself.
Oh.
And just be a vessel for the practice. And I found that very liberating because I was like, oh, good. So I don't have to carry that responsibility. I can just carry the responsibility of showing up and creating a container where we offer choice. And we also, more importantly than anything, teach students to attune so that they can check in and go, what do I need today? What do I need right now? And is this the kind of day where I actually deserve to give myself the comfort and go, hey, it's just really good to be here with you today? Or is this the kind of day where I'm like, you know what? I feel like I want to play with expanding how much I can handle. So that's where I would start off, I think.
I'm so pleased that you started there, and what a wonderful gift for a teacher to give you to right away take the burden of the world off of your shoulders and acknowledge that it's not your job to fix or cure or be all knowing or to be the yoga. You're just passing it through you. The practice itself can do the holding. What a fantastic place to start. We could finish the podcast right now. Thank you so
We're good.
much.
We're done.
But let's break down each of the areas, each of the arguments or themes in a little more detail, and I'm sure we'll come back to that at the end. So on the side for comfort, on the side for safe spaces and welcoming and inclusive spaces, why is that so important, and why is that something that's coming up in the conversation so often these days?
Mm. I feel like it's because we've created a world that's so out of balance with how we're meant to function as human
Mm,
beings. We're in a world that demands constant stimulation, constantly keeping up with things. I know I, for the life of me, can never ever keep up with my emails. And I've had to, at some point, make peace with that and go, you know what? I'm just going to do my best. And then
mhm,
I have to offer myself compassion for the fact that we're not designed to be able to constantly consume information, constantly go from one place to the next to do so
mhm,
many things, being responsive, responsive to messages and calls and checking emails. So that's a world that's so out of balance with how we're meant to function as human beings, and
mm,
that kind of ebb and flow between activity and rest and restoration. And so the value of comfort becomes that we get to reclaim that really vital aspect of our aliveness that actually
mm,
fuels our capacity to then be even more productive and even more, even if I tell people, like, if the concept of rest doesn't feel appealing, it's fine. Just do it to be more productive. Like, you don't have to do it for the sake of it if you're not there yet. We can utilize whatever motivates you. And if that's productivity, that's okay. Let's just rest anyway. Um,
What a sad statement on the world, but it's so true, isn't it? I mean, that's why a lot of corporations are embracing yoga and mindfulness and other practices of down regulation, because the hope is people will be more productive afterwards.
exactly. Yeah. And as sad of a reality as it is, if it works, let's
Yeah,
just
it
make it
works.
work.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And we know as practitioners of yoga and as teachers of yoga how powerfully it can downregulate. And given that most of us are in some level of chronic upregulation, we can all appreciate how powerful it can be to exhale, to set down
Mm.
our burdens for a moment, to be in our bodies, to be in our community. I think we can all understand and appreciate how much we seem to need that at the moment.
Yeah. And I feel like we know this deep down, but we sometimes forget that there's so much more value in somebody's quality of presence and the way they show up than what they do or what they deliver and the content of what they offer. And when we actually allow ourselves to slow down just enough, right? And it's each person's degree of slowing down is going to be subjective to them, but just slowing down enough to really come in contact with who we are and how we are and where we're at, that is a quality of presence that's entirely different than here's what I'm offering. And even though it's all amazing and it's all valuable, there's quite a bit of it. So I'm caught up in the doing as opposed to the being. Which,
Mhm.
I mean, when I say doing and being, I'm like, oh, that's such a cliche yoga thing to say. But also, like, I know you get me when I say things like that, Rachel.
Cliche for a
It's
reason.
cliche for a reason, exactly. There's something about, you know, like I had a family therapy teacher just a couple of weeks ago who in her presence is not rushed to do anything at
Mhm,
all. And it's so easy for us to get restless. But then I noticed I get so much more from being around her
mhm,
than I do in most trainings where we're constantly learning and receiving. And I never paused to appreciate it. And I think it took many years into my career to appreciate how much maturity she offers by trusting that presence is that powerful.
Hmm. I
So
love
that would be
that.
a big for comfort is just who we become when we give
Hmm.
ourselves permission.
I love that. And it's another load off the yoga teacher's shoulders too, because you're right, there is this almost frantic pressure to come up with all the tools and to provide the new things and to stay up to date with all the latest information. And sometimes, I mean, all of that stuff is really important. We've talked about that side of teaching on the podcast before, but we've also had some conversations recently about the more right brain side of maybe it's not about doing all the things perfectly. Maybe it's simply about being there and being present to what's going on and giving students permission to do the same.
Mm. As humans and well, all mammals with nervous systems, we're so much more process and kind of essence based
Hmm.
than content based. And we forget that in a very cerebral world, but the reality is it's that feeling you have when you're, if you're a dog lover, when you're cuddling with a puppy or playing with a puppy. Like there are things and experiences that go beyond words that are just incredibly powerful because we're now speaking nervous system.
Hmm.
And when we're speaking nervous system, the foundation of our existence responds to that. We don't have to go up into analysis mode to tell ourselves that this is a valuable experience. So comfort lands us in that space.
Yes. Yeah, I had this conversation with somebody online a few weeks ago, actually, where I don't even remember what I posted, but the comment was, but yoga is a practice of transformation. And I said, yeah, it totally can be. But I also like to think that it creates a space in which we can be more of ourselves.
Mm,
Because to me, that's what the practice gives me. It lets me shed all of the layers of doing and thinking and processing and allows me to simply be the me that I already am underneath when I set some of that stuff aside. Yeah.
mm. Yeah,
Well, I think
I that completely resonates.
we're both pretty firmly in camp comfort. We've got happy happy footing in camp comfort. So let's look at the other side. And when we were talking about this conversation, planning it, I shared with you that what triggered me to finally have a conversation on this was two admittedly wealthy white guys saying that suffering is sacred. This sort of stoic infused philosophy that's really popular a little bit in yoga, but definitely in the sort of wellness and movement world of life has become too easy. Life has become too comfortable. And for us to benefit, for us to grow, we need to be outside of our comfort zone. We've got to be hot or cold or, exhausted or stressed or, to challenge our comfort zones in order to be our fully human selves and not, sad little sheeple addicted to soft drink and television shows. So what's the case for challenge and courage and pushing our comfort zones?
I would start by saying more than anything, we need to figure out who we want to be in this moment and
Mm,
how we want to show up to life in this moment. So if somebody wants to grow, I'm going to say, great, let's figure out how you would want to grow and how you want to challenge that comfort. But if someone goes, you know what, life has been really hard lately and I just want to like curl up in a blanket and just eat spaghetti and watch something mind numbing online, then man, do that. Like
yeah.
sometimes it's as simple as what do we need right now? We don't
Mhm.
have to, this is not a lifelong marriage to who we're going to be. This is a what serves me right now. Do I want to grow and challenge myself right now? And if I do, why do I want to do that? What
Mm.
is it about that that I'm seeking? Because when we step out of just overall like challenge and growth versus ease and comfort into what am I hoping that's going to give me? Then we can really tailor how we approach that to what we're hoping to get. And
Yeah,
even
I
if we're
think that's
showing
so
up to
powerful.
yeah, and even if we're showing up to a class as a student and we're already being we're already receiving a practice, we're still going to focus on or make the choices within that class that cater to what we're hoping to get.
Mhm.
So there is a case for challenge in the sense that yeah, our resilience can expand when we gently begin to stretch our comfort zone. I think the often missed detail, though, is that for us to expand that most effectively, we need to find the sweet spot that allows for repair.
Mm.
So rupture always strengthens what's being ruptured if we allow ample time for adequate repair for whatever that thing is, whether it's micro tears in our muscles or, um, just a feeling of like, ooh, that was psychologically challenging, and then bringing in comfort to recover from that. Whether it's having had a really productive day and giving ourselves really good rest at the end of the day to recover so that we can go, wow, I can handle more now.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I would start there.
Yeah, I love that. I think you've brought out two really crucial points. One is the choice you're making in this moment is just that. It's for this moment, that you're not wedded to this forever. Right now, what do I need? And the answer can be different in a minute, in 5 minutes, in a day, in 5 days, in 5 years. You're not wedded to one approach for always and forever. And the second thing is, you'd think people in the movement world would get this more than anybody. You can't challenge yourself 24/7, 7 days a week. Challenge requires a safe space for you to come home to repair from, to step forward from when you're ready for that next layer of difficulty. You can't just be out there all the time. You've got to have a safe home to come back to. I think those are both really powerful points to remember.
Mm. And a third one I would add, just as I hear you reflect on those points,
Mm.
is the importance of bringing in some element of safety into the challenge. That's where the reappraisal happens. So where challenge is really valuable, and I have to remind myself of this because again, like you said, I'm camp comfort. I just want to like, you know, do restorative and yoga nidra, and which wasn't me when I started yoga. I started yoga because I wanted to do scorpion pose. Like it was
Mhm.
literally that superficial for me. But and so again, going back to what you said about different seasons, and that's just where we are at different points in
Mhm.
time. But the case for challenge is that it can allow us to create some kind of reappraisal around what the sensations or the thoughts or the narratives or the emotions that come with the challenge mean to us. Because
Mhm.
as humans, we're meaning making machines. We assign meaning to everything. You know, I, for example, am someone who does not like cardio, and I made myself go on a run last weekend, which, like, everybody was responding to me and going, "Who are you and what is happening?" And the reason I did that is I know that when I'm doing intense cardio and my breath gets shorter and my heart rate is quicker, there's a part of me that goes into, "What is this? Is this anxiety? Am I okay? Am I safe?" And so I'm doing it to conquer that story so that when my mind is trying to make that meaning, I'm like, no, no, no. This is me choosing by
Mhm.
choice to run, to elevate my heart rate, to become okay with the fact that my breathing feels different. And I'm going to look at that really pretty tree, or I'm going to feel the temperature of the breeze as I'm running to remind myself to bring in the element of safety so that I can change what I've associated those sensations with. So I would
Yes.
say the case challenge is that we can rewrite a story. But
Yes.
to do that, in order to rewrite that story, we need to bring in some kind of input that changes what we associate particular sensations or thoughts with.
Mm.
And we need to bring in compassion. And, for me, it was humor. Like I was laughing at some of my dramatic thoughts, going, I know that's what we're thinking. It's not absolute reality, but it's okay that we're thinking that. So to rewrite stories becomes a really powerful place when we lean into challenge.
Yes. Yeah. And I think a part of the yoga practice for many of us is that it gives us a space in which to challenge our habits and our perceptions and our beliefs, and to observe our thoughts and observe our feelings while acknowledging that we are not just our thoughts and not just our feelings. But none of that has value, exactly as you said, if we don't know that we're safe. If we're, if you're running and you're literally running from an attacker, that's quite a different process from you running by choice and looking at a tree. And so you can only get the sort of benefits of challenge when you know that you actually are safe and you have a safe place to go back to. That's what gives you the courage to step outside of your comfort zone and to put yourself into a situation where you are forced to reassess and reevaluate and re-examine, knowing that you can go back there should you want to, when you need to.
Yeah, and when we do that, when we bring that intentionality of bringing in some elements of safety into challenge, we're building a new habit. We're creating almost like a new neural pathway so that when life does hand us challenging things that weren't things we've chosen,
Yes.
we can lean into the habits of, even when I'm really stressed, what's one component of safety that I can find in my immediate environment
Mm-hmm.
that can give me that motivation to go, or that reassurance rather, to go, you know what? I'm going to be okay. I'll figure this out,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So we look for cues of safety even when we are in actual danger. And those
Yes.
cues of safety can become a boost that supports us as we make it to the other side and go, whew, that was over. Okay, I'm okay. I made it.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And I think you've already given away where we were heading to at the end of the conversation, which is how do we, as yoga teachers, create spaces for our students where they can make those decisions for themselves, where number one, they know how they feel on the day. And number two, they know that they're able to decide, I'm going to stay somewhere that's safe and comfortable and welcoming, and I'm going to rebuild my reserves, or I'm going to step up and take that challenge and go a bit faster, or try that crow pose, or whatever the challenge is for the day, or sit still in meditation. How do we create an environment where people are empowered to know what they need and make smart decisions?
Mm. My belief is always, whenever we hold any kind of space, that it starts with us.
Mm,
We have to do the work ourselves. We are always the most powerful intervention that we can offer, you know, whether it's in a teaching setting or in a therapeutic setting or wherever it may be, or a medical setting, right? And that's not to say like, wow, the teacher is everything, but it's to say that the most powerful thing you share, or intervention or tool that you bring to the table, is who you are. And
mhm,
so if we become the embody of what we're hoping to teach, the embodiment of what we're hoping to teach, it becomes so much easier for our students to eventually tap into that. And I need to look into the research of this because I don't know how it works. I can just say that from nearly a decade of teaching, that's what I constantly see is the less I'm in my head and the more I've done my own practices and I've connected to myself and I've done my personal work, the easier people seem to get there. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I'm actually working less hard today than I was last week, you know? And on the weeks where I'm less in myself and more in the doing, it
mhm.
seems like it's more work to get people there. There's something just in how we exist as humans. We pick things up off of each other, because I can show up and say all the quote
All the
unquote
things.
right things, right? Listen to your body, make choices that feel good for you. But if I'm just parroting that as like a top down instruction, that
Mm,
lands very differently than if I'm making choices without even saying anything as I'm teaching. It Students pick that up non-verbally. So I would always say it starts with us.
yes.
And when we're comfortable making those choices for ourselves, and when we're completely comfortable trusting students to make their own choices for themselves, the way we say that, the way we communicate that in a class, both verbally and non-verbally, becomes a lot more effective.
I agree. Yeah, I think you've expressed it beautifully, that not that it starts and finishes with the teacher, because as you said, it's the practice that stands on its own. But we've got to have done the work before we come into the room so that we can do less work when we're in the room. So if this is a conversation that you're finding interesting or intriguing, then I think it's important for you to sit in your own practice going, where do I find comfort? Where do I seek comfort? Which things make me feel safe and included and welcoming? It's really important to have those in your toolkit and to know what they are. but also where do I tend to go looking for challenges, and where do I shy away from challenges, and how do challenges make me feel? Do I notice the times in my practice where I'm uncomfortable or uneasy, or do I immediately launch into a story that I'm not even aware that I'm telling myself? So the more we can do that reflection in our own practice and in our own life, I guess the easier it becomes to create classes and spaces that facilitate that kind of inquiry for others, whether we're speaking to it specifically or not.
Yeah, and I love all those reflections, and it's those are reflections that we don't even need to necessarily have the answers to. We just
Yeah.
need to be asking questions.
Yeah. Like many
Like,
things in yoga.
yeah, and I feel like as teachers, we probably all had this experience of showing up to teach a class when we're actually feeling really raw. You know,
Mhm.
we were like up all night worried about a loved one who was at the hospital, or,
Mm,
you know, this thing is happening and we're going, how's it going to go? And am I even going to be able to show up and hold space? And
mm.
I would imagine that most of us have had the experience that sometimes those are the most powerful classes we teach, even though we have no answers at that point.
Mhm.
But what happens in those spaces is we become so raw and in touch with our humanity that we just show up as a real human and go, man, I'm just gonna do the best I can.
Yes.
I'm just gonna show up right now. And again, those are the times where we're showing up as a human being as opposed to trying to do and, you know, teach comfort or teach challenge.
Mm.
And so when we say, you know, reflecting on all of these concepts, it's not about having answers to them. It's just about being willing to be a human being that engages in that inquiry and showing up
Yes.
from there.
Yeah, I feel like the thread that has been working its way through the entire conversation is compassion. Compassion for and with ourselves, compassion for and with our students. And I guess from that compassionate place, a sense of trust that sometimes we do all the things and it's a great class. Sometimes we do all the things and it's not a great class. Sometimes we come in that really raw state and we wonder if we're even going to be able to do it. And and sometimes setting aside the weight of expectation and just going, I'm here and I'll do the best I can is the most powerful thing. So yeah, I don't even know that I have a question from that, but just the thread that's coming through for me repeatedly is both approaches actually require compassion to kind of weld them together into something useful. And sometimes compassion works best when we're just feeling it and not thinking about it or talking about it, but
Yeah.
just feeling it in our hearts.
Yeah, and the concept that comes up for me when I hear you say that is, you know, people often ask, where is the line or the balance between surrender and responsibility?
Mm,
And we can link that to comfort and challenge, right? We can
mm,
think of them as sorts of mirrors of each other. And surrender and responsibility come together in some ways because it's the trust that every human being in that room is going to have the experience that they are meant to have. That's the
mhm,
surrender element. And then the responsibility element is to just go, you know, how do I show up and do the best I can do in this moment, whatever that is, and trust that that's going to be enough.
mhm,
And that's where the comfort and the challenge come together. I'm doing my part, and I'm
mhm.
also going, there's something much larger taking care of everybody's processes right now.
Yes, I love that. And I think it's like most of the conversations that seem so black and white on social media actually boil down to being really similar sides of the same coin. Like you said, with surrender and responsibility, comfort versus challenge, they're actually just sides of the same set of behaviors, which requires us to show up and hold space and to trust that our students are getting what they need, not from us and the things that we do and say, but from the practice itself. And the reason that we teach it is because we love it. We benefit from it. We've relied on it. It's been powerful for us. Why would it not work the same way for our students in time?
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I think we leave it there. I think that creates some interesting places for people to experiment. And we knew right from the outset that this wouldn't be a conversation where we'd give you a 3-point checklist or a 5-point checklist to finish with. So if that's what you came hoping for, you came to the wrong podcast, my friends. But definitely some interesting questions to ponder in your practice. And as you said, not even to necessarily answer them, but to ask them and to hold space for what comes up when you ask those questions. To notice what times you need comfort and safety and security and welcome, and to know the ways that you can get that, and what times in your life and your practice that you want to challenge your perceptions or your expectations or your limits a little bit, and to notice how and when you can do those, and to create spaces where your students get to do the same as they see fit. Any last words of wisdom you'd like to leave us with?
Not really. I'd just love to hear people's experiences about this. So if anyone's listening and is open to sharing, please let us know, message
Mm-hmm.
us or tag us or email us or whatever it may be. But I'd love to hear your personal experiences around this, because I think everybody's individual experience is a gift to the world and a master class for us to be in awe of, really, more than anything.
Yes. Jump into the comments, people. I'm keen to hear what your experiences have been, and whether, like us, you've got 1.5 feet in camp comfort, or whether you found some real power in that sort of transformational fire of yoga, of stepping outside yourself and doing things you didn't think you were capable of, and maybe outside of yoga too. I love that. Jump into the comments. Let us know what's come up for you. And in the meantime, where would you send people who want to know more about you and what you do?
So the place I'm most active is my Instagram. So that's just my name on Instagram. That's usually where I share the most content. But there's also my website, which is also myname.com, where I've put in a collection of other resources as well. And I hope to update that soon. I'm also on Yoga Medicine Online. So I'm always really excited to point people in that direction, because I love being a student on that platform as well.
Magic. Well, we'll link to all of those in the show notes. Thank you so much for making time to have this philosophical conversation and to so beautifully thread comfort and courage and challenge together with that thread of compassion. Thank you very much, Aisha.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks for listening to Yoga Medicine. If you liked the show, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you got something out of this episode, please spread the word and share it with a friend. You can find more information, articles, trainings, and classes at yogamedicine.com. Check us out on social media as Yoga Medicine, or you can email us at info@yogamedicine.com. Thank you for being part of our Yoga Medicine community. The content of this podcast is not medical advice and is not meant to replace medical care. Please consult your healthcare provider to determine what is best for your unique healthcare needs.